So just a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you. We've tested the chat. So if anything happens with the slides, you've lost sound or anything, let us know there. The Q&A section is open, so I will answer questions as we go along, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end. And for those of you, we will be recording the session and distributing it afterwards anyway, so just in case you're looking for it. And so after that rather tumultuous start, I will hand over to Dougie and I'll drive the slides. Thanks.
Thanks, Kimberly. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. I'm Dougie Robb. I'm CEO here at Smart Data Foundry, and I'm joined today by my colleague Hui Cardoso, who heads up our public sector engagement. I'm delighted that you can join us for what's a really exciting milestone for us here at Smart Data Foundry, the launch of our Economic Wellbeing Explorer for England and Wales. For those of you who may be new to us, Smart Data Foundry is a not-for-profit subsidiary of the University of Edinburgh. Our mission is simple but ambitious. It's to open up financial data for good. We believe that smart, responsibly accessed data has the power to drive better decisions, better policies, and ultimately better outcomes for people and communities. And we focus our efforts where we think our data can make the biggest difference. Firstly, reducing poverty and inequality, and then also targeted at improving economic well-being. And that's why today's launch matters so much. When we first introduced our Economic Wellbeing Explorer in Scotland earlier this year, our aim was to make data that had previously been unavailable, available, usable and valuable to the public sector, to researchers and to policymakers. And what we've seen since that pilot launch has been remarkable. The Explorer has helped local authorities and government teams to better understand the drivers of economic well-being, from income variability and financial resilience to education, housing, and local economic activity. It's already being used to support initiatives to reduce child poverty, to evaluate the impact of education and employment programs, and to shape more effective approaches to reducing economic inactivity and improving productivity. And now, with today's launch, we're expanding the Explorer to cover England and Wales too. So that means opening up these insights to a much wider set of partners across government, whether that be local or national government, the UK academic research community, NGOs, right across Great Britain. And we'd love to see all of these groups making use of our data, for example, to create support the creation of well-researched policy ideas that can be applied, and also to create timely and local interventions that can be successfully applied. Whilst this launch is a big step forward in our mission to make data more accessible for the public good, we need to be clear that data on its own is not the solution. But when it's used by people who really understand their work in communities, who can create evidence-based policy ideas, turn insight into action, that's where we can see the real benefit potential. And we've seen this already in places like East Renfrewshire Council, where teams have used the Explorer to take a data-informed, neighbourhood-specific approach to addressing local policy challenges. By combining local knowledge with deeper data insight, they've shown what's possible when evidence and experience come together. And that's exactly the kind of partnerships and purpose we want to create across the rest of the UK. And in a few moments, you'll hear from Hui. He will take you through how we make this data accessible and how the Explorer brings together complex information in a way that's easy to navigate and act upon. I hope you find it both fascinating and inspiring to see how we can create opportunities across the research and policy spaces simply by opening up data. So thanks again for joining us and for your shared commitment to using data for good. We're incredibly proud of what's been achieved so far and even more excited about what's to come as we bring our Economic Wellbeing Explorer to the whole of the UK. Thank you, and with that, I will hand over to Hui.
So I'm here to talk through about the Economic Wellbeing Explorer. I'll do a demonstration in a little bit. First, I'll talk to you about the data that supports the Economic Wellbeing Explorer. So as Dougie mentioned, our mission is to open financial data for good. One of the biggest partnerships we had is in NatWest Group, which in the next slide we'll see a little bit of details about the type of data that we have access to. This is data that covers Scotland, England, and Wales. It's over 5 million current account records that we receive on a weekly basis. So it's very much accurate and up-to-date data. From this data, we can see, Kimberly, if you could mind going to the next slide. For this data, we can see both the income and expenditure categories from the data. So the income, we can see the total, the amount of income that comes in into each current account data. These current accounts are completely de-identified, of course, but we can see certain characteristics on the data, like Dougie,
Do you want to switch to your headphones because you are breaking up a wee bit? I don't know if it's what it's like for other people, but the
okay,
audio is
just
breaking up a wee bit.
give me 1 second.
It's just a day of technical hitches for the moment, but I'm going to say we're weathering them well.
Yeah, just give us a couple of minutes, folks. Sorry about this. If you just bear with us a wee bit longer, please.
Okay. Better.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. We covered this yesterday and I completely forgot. So apologies about that, folks. I'll just rewind a little bit. So today I'm here to talk about our Economic Wellbeing Explorer. Our Economic Wellbeing Explorer is powered by one of our data partners, data sets, which comes from NatWest Group. So this is over 5 million current account records across England, Scotland, and Wales. This is de-identified data, of course. We can't access the name of any of the accounts, but we can see some characteristics on the accounts, like, for example, age ranges, male, female, and maybe more importantly, some first line of postcode, so we can locate the data on the map. From the data set, we can also see the income and expenditure categories on the spend on these accounts. The data comes in every week, so it's very much near real-time look into people's finances. From the income categories, we can see the amount of income coming in, but also the income source, so how much money is coming from salaries versus benefits, pensions, etc. And from the expenditure categories, we can also see great number of categories which allows us detail to look into the detail of how people are spending their money. So we can look into how much money is spent on mortgage or rent, groceries, transports, energy, etc., etc. So this really powerful data set allows us then to create the Economic Wellbeing Explorer, which if you go to the next slide, we can have a little look about who the Explorer is actually designed for. It's designed for a variety of organizations for good, for example, in the public sector, policy making or interventions to have a better understanding of people's economies. It's designed for NGOs as well. Policy teams and service providers in local authorities, as Doug mentioned, with the work that we've been doing with East Renfrewshire Council. It's a map-based platform which offers really powerful insights and comparative capability across different regions in the country. Allows you to track some of the economic well-being metrics that we've created across over time and across geography. So it's a smarter resource planning tool, allows for service design, policy development, and evidence-driven interventions, which can become really impactful when we work in collaboration with partners that are providing the services or thinking through policies or interventions for those that most need. I will now take over the sharing of the screen so I can actually show you the platform itself. So you should now be able to see, yeah, perfect. So here's the Economic Wellbeing Explorer. Hopefully everyone can see. If not, let us know in the comments. The Economic Wellbeing Explorer, as you see here, as allows us to navigate some of the financial metrics that we created. So if we go here and click on the dot in Scotland, we can see some of the financial indicators that we created. So out of that data set from NatWest, our data science team has worked really hard to create these indicators. Here, for example, we're looking at three indicators that we create so far, with more coming down the pipeline and the roadmaps to allow for deeper and more meaningful use cases as well. So here we're looking at people with overdrawn accounts. You can see that the data sample for Scotland is 562,000 current accounts. And what the indicator means is that out of the sample that we have of over 500,000 current accounts, 16% of those since on the 5 weeks prior to the data being updated. So you can see here when the last data update was, just slightly over a month ago. We try to update data every month. We can see that 16% of those, or the equivalent 89,000 of those accounts, have been consistently overdrawn. That means that twice or more they went into under the zero value and been overdrawn on their account. It doesn't matter if they have an overdraft or not, as long as the account was overdrawn, that's counted here. The second metric looks at slightly different financial difficulty, so people living beyond their means. So this means that in the same logic, in the weeks prior to the data being updated, 12% or 66,000 of those 500,000 accounts have been living beyond their means. So that means spending 20% more of the income in the time period that we've established of 13 weeks prior to the data update for this one. Last one, and maybe the one that is a little bit more concerning, is people with low emergency resilience. So this one looks at people, current accounts that after spending all the essential expenditure have been left with less than £100 on their account. So being vulnerable to some emergency happening in that month, for example, a washing machine breaking down or a car needing to be fixed, might get them into that debt line, the poverty line, which they might then need to resource to things like credit cards or payday loans, etc. So here we can see how almost 200,000 of the 500,000 represented in this sample have been struggling with low emergency resilience. So these different types of metrics allow us to look at different ways of people managing their money and different ways that people have been struggling in the 4 different nations. So if I jump here to England, for example, you will see that the data sample changes. So in England, we have almost 4 million current accounts. And you can see that the financial indicators also changed slightly, 17% overdrawn accounts, 13% living beyond means, and 37% low emergency resilience. And the same again for Wales with almost 220,000 and 18%, 12%, and 38% respectively. Because of the way we receive the data, we also have the ability to implement some filters on the dashboard. So for example, we might change year and we just want to look at the accounts belonging to someone between 18 and 39 years old. What that will do is automatically update the sample here. Sorry. So here the sample has become smaller and the numbers have become different. So 25% of 18 to 39 years old with overdrawn accounts, 9% living on means, and 56% low emergency resilience Scotland. And same again in England, that shows slightly different. We can also look at different income bands. So if we want to then look at 18 to 39 years old making under 25,000, then the sample and the metrics change again. And we can see here for England, 25%, 18%, and 68% of people. As you might imagine, with lower salaries, the more people will be under that low emergency resilience metric. If we go back and allow for income bands, the data here is aggregated at the 3 nations level. What's really powerful about the dashboard is that as you zoom in, the data starts disaggregating. So instead of looking at the nations here, we're looking at regions across Great Britain. And we can go and click again on the circles, and the data is all updated for the different regions. So you can have a comparative tool across Great Britain and try to understand some of the nuances of how people might be struggling in different areas of the country, some of the nuances from our more urban or regional regions, or north and south divide, etc., etc. If we zoom in a little bit more, then the data gets further disaggregated into local authority level data. And here you start seeing the difference in the size of the circles a little bit more obviously. So the size of the circle, as you can see here, is the more people struggling with the financial metric that I've selected, the bigger the size of the circle here. So you can see notable differences, for example, between South Lanarkshire and Dunford and Galways, or in England, if we go more in the middle of the country, we can see slightly differences between, for example, Knowsley and Stratfordshire. If I move across the different financial metrics here, you'll see that the size of the circles changes. So this becomes a quite intuitive and visual tool as you move across the map and you move across the different financial metrics. You can rely on the eye test of just looking through the map and looking at the size of the circle changing to actually understand which areas are struggling a little bit more than the others with each of the financial metrics. Now, if I zoom in even a little bit more, then this becomes really interesting in terms of that neighborhood assessment of the data. So here, looking into the Leeds area, we can see the data then split at MSOA or neighborhood level. And this is the most powerful visualization for example, the local authorities that we've been working with, because it allows them to go neighborhood by neighborhood and have a much deeper understanding of financial difficulties. So it works in the same logic where we can move across the local authority area, and every time we click on the circle, it gives an MSOA, which is a medium super output area, how it's called. So it looks at different neighborhoods within the local authority. And here you can really see the size differences, which will reflect in the metrics, different areas of the local authority. And it's been really useful not only to confirm some of the assumptions about what some local authorities might call the historical financial distress areas, but maybe even as important is how it uncovers hidden poverty in some areas that the council might have not been aware of increasing financial difficulties, especially coming out of COVID, going into energy crisis, going into mortgage crisis, and more recently the cost of living crisis that we've all been feeling. So to have that information that is based not just on income sources, but also in how much people are spending to live their daily lives, it's been really powerful for local authorities to have a deeper understanding of each of the communities. And here, it's where the size of the circles becomes ever more obvious because of the stark differences from some neighborhoods to others within the local authorities. Now, you will have noticed that there's also a series of colors in the dashboard. That's so as part of the initial work we've done with this for Renfrewshire, we've realized that the financial data was really useful to pinpoint problem areas, but it was also really useful to actually bring in and correlate some contextual data points as well. And that's to do with not only understanding the problems deeper, but actually trying to get that overlay of different data sets to try to understand some of the possible solutions that might be on the table for local authorities or for national organizations. I know we have people from MAPS here today, Money and Pension Services, so the service type of organizations that can help people actually get through this financial crisis. So for example, we have a series of contextual data sets, and these ones you can easily visualize by the color coding here on the right-hand side. So here we're looking at a demographic data set coming from census, which looks at a percentage of households with someone living in it with a disability or a long-term health issue. So here we can quickly glance over the map, and by comparing the size of the circle and the color coding, we can understand, for example, if there's a specific grant or a specific benefit or type of support for people with disability and in financial difficulties. We can use the map to very quickly identify which MSOAs or neighborhoods within the local authority could be of the most benefit from such a support mechanism. So here you can see that this area here specifically is the one that has the biggest percentage of people with a disability living in the area, but maybe not the one with the bigger financial difficulties in terms of people with overdrawn accounts. We can then maybe change that to people with a low emergency resilience, and we see that there is a bigger percentage of people, 55% of people in that area with low emergency resilience. So that would be just based on the visual test, maybe to be the most priority area to actually implement some of those types of solutions. We can move across different metrics. So for example, we have families with dependent children or youth population. Same logic, so if there is a specific way to support people under 16 in financial difficulties or people with dependent children in financial difficulties, we can use the map and very quickly identify quite a few areas here which need that support for those families with dependent children. As we worked with the local authority, we realized that there's a variety of use cases that this could possibly be useful for, and that work with local authorities have then added on to the types of contextual data that we brought into the dashboard. So for example, in terms of housing, we brought in data on average house prices, which you can see from the key here. Of course, this is for all of Great Britain, so the more expensive areas will mostly be reserved for London areas, and the rest of the country is slightly cheaper, as you might expect. And one that has been really useful is integrating the data from EPC ratings. So here we're looking at the homes with poor energy efficiency. So the purple circles being the neighborhoods with the most percentage of homes with poor energy efficiency. So when we talk about net zero and retrofitting housing and getting to the net zero targets that the most of the world has established, this becomes a really powerful tool to not only understand the amount of investment needed to retrofit some of the housing, but also the ability of people living in those areas to actually invest in this retrofitting. So you can see that some areas do have poor energy efficiency, but maybe the sizes are circle, less people with low, the size of the circle are smaller, so less people with low emergency resilience, so thus maybe better ability to invest in retrofitting the houses, in contrast with some of the areas which are really poor in terms of energy efficiency, but also really struggling with the indicator of low emergency resilience. So that's indicating that even though there's a need to invest, there's probably less possibility of the people living in that area to actually invest in some of those retrofitting mechanisms and technologies. Another useful, as Dagi mentioned, this tool has been used from another local authority in Scotland around employability and education. So another useful data set has been to explore the amount of people that have reached different levels of qualifications within the neighborhood. So as we go from here, no qualifications, which you can see some areas in with really high, to 30% in terms of people that have no qualifications, and then we can move that basic secondary or go all the way up to further education. And here you can start seeing a little bit more of a difference from neighborhood to neighborhood, where in certain areas here in the northern part have more people in further education, whereas across the south and the center you see less people that have achieved that level of qualification. Now, as we worked with the councils, it became obvious that if we were able to integrate some of the data from the local authority itself into the dashboard, for example, data on service provision. For example, here in East Renfrewshire, we have integrated data on money advice and rights. So this is service provision and service take-up of financial advice services from the local authority. This is the types of services that can help people navigate how the state can support some of the financial difficulties, like getting into grants or emergency grants, or getting a bit better understanding on the benefits that might be available and how to apply to those benefits. So by cross-matching the areas of financial difficulties with the actual take-up on some of these services, the council can be a lot more targeted in how they actually support people that might not have been aware of the types of services that the council can provide to get them out of that difficult situation. So here it's been quite useful for the council itself, because they've uncovered some areas where, in contrast with areas where the financial difficulties are high, like here in that area here, but there is quite a deep knowledge of how the state can help, maybe the community knowledge or the family knowledge. There's been some areas that when we started working with the local authority more on this area of the council, there was a lot more financial difficulties, but not a lot of people taking up on those services. That situation has since normalized a little bit, so that's good. But that really allowed the council to think through about how they can use this data to uncover hidden poverty and to provide data to social workers, to school teachers in this format, in an easy format that they can understand, actually have a better understanding of each community, and to tailor the services a bit more to actually serve the population in those areas. So a variety of data sets have been integrated from East Renfrewshire. We're now going through the process of integrating other data sets with other local authorities, with, for example, Edinburgh Council looking at homelessness use cases as well, and bringing in things like council tax arrears and housing stock for each of the neighborhoods, to compare that again to the financial difficulties and use that information to be a lot more targeted in how they provide those services, they advertise those services, and even understanding the way that the people in the different areas like to use those services and adapt some of those mechanisms as well. The data partnership with NatWest Group, as it goes back to 2020, here allows for a longitudinal study of the data. On the dashboard itself, we allow you to go back in time up to 12 months, so you can just go across this timeline function to change the data to different points in the calendar, and then try to understand maybe when and where, when problems have started, and try to understand how they've developed over the course of the last 12 months. And of course, we keep updating the data every month. So this becomes a way to understand if some of the interventions implemented are working, if they're working in the way that we desire, or if there's a need for a pivot because things are improving. Also to validate some of the things that the organizations are doing by having the data to show and prove that things are heading in the right direction after those interventions, which is also crucial in terms of justifying public funds and understanding if the things we're doing are actually working. Now, the map dashboard is a really visual and cool way to explore the data, but it's not always the most useful way to actually make decisions. So in collaboration with the local authorities, we have worked on other ways to exploring the data, for example, the time series. Here we can select a timeline, and then we can select, for example, England, and compare. Here we're looking at people with low emergency resilience, so we can select England and then select, for example, East Midlands and start comparing. So we're not looking at the data points in isolation, we're actually comparing it to national averages or regional averages. So if we add also, for example, Leeds, as we were looking at here, we can start understanding that Leeds is trending above in people with low emergency resilience from both England averages and East Midland averages, or we can add the relevant region here to try to understand, yeah, it's still trending above in people with low emergency resilience, so over up five percentage points above the Northwest England averages. Here in the comparisons, we can go all the way to comparing to neighborhoods. So if there's a need to compare the data from a specific MSOA to, again, local authority, regional or national levels, the tool allows you to as well. And you can also use the filters I showed you before to actually be more targeted in those comparisons. So if we change, for example, the metric to living beyond means, you'll see that unlike the low emergency resilience, in terms of people living beyond means, Leeds is very much in trend with England and the different regions I've selected here. You can change the timeline as well and go a bit farther back in time to try to understand if that trend has persisted across the 12 months or if it's something newer that you're observing here. Now, as part of the time series Data Explorer, we also have a year-on-year comparison. And this is to do with some of the metrics that we see sometimes are seasonal. And sometimes we're looking at, for example, if I move here to people, if I just get rid of the filters, we'll be able to see that, for example, last year, so the last year being the green line, this year being the orange line, last year there was a lot more people over the summer months that were living beyond means, where this year we observe a different trend. Maybe there's less consumer confidence this year and people taking less liberties in terms of going on holidays and spending some of the money over the summer. And that trend consists across the different selections. So England, Northwest, Leeds, East Midlands, and Ferry Hill South, which is one of the neighborhoods that I've selected here. So there's a lot of that year-on-year comparison to understand. Sometimes for example, leading up now to Christmas, we might see more and more people living beyond means. So we might, if we look at the data in isolation, it might seem concerning trend, but if then we use the yearly comparison, we might understand that this has been the same last year. And then, so less concerning, and you know that things are likely to stabilize after Christmas. We also have a ranked summary. This is just a quick look into always the top 5 and the bottom 5 of whichever metric we've selected, which allow for a very quick look into the biggest areas of priority within a local authority or within national level, different local authorities or different regions. The resource pages, which you can access this dashboard not at the full level for free, but if you make an account in our portal, you'll be able to see this data at both this national level and the regional level, which is I would really highly encourage you to do. It's a really cool tool to navigate and some cool data points to actually explore. And you also have access to the resource section, which explains a little bit more how we've selected and created the different metrics that we have, also the source of each of the contextual data sets. You can also see here some of the metrics that we're working on, will be coming soon. One I'm particularly looking forward to is these metrics around high benefits income. This will look at the kind of accounts that have 40% or more of the total income coming from benefits, so showing that a little bit of dependency on those benefits into the account to actually afford the day-to-day of people's lives. So, as I said, really encourage you to make an account if you go to our portal at MyFoundry. There'll be a QR code in the end that you can navigate straight there. You make an account, we'll let you in as long as you're from a relevant organization that works for public good on research and not for commercial purposes. We'll let you into the dashboard and see those two levels of zoom into the dashboard. Kimberly, you have your hand up.
I do. It's just to ask if you could. There's a question about what proportion of sample size we have on respective national population. If you could go back to the map and show that where we can show that, please.
That's a good point. So once we click on the circles here at any level, you can see the percentage of representation. So that's just comparing the customers in the sample that we have to the total population. So for England we have 7%, for Scotland we have 10%, for Wales we have 7% again. And as you zoom into the different regions, that will always be available. So from region to region, you can see, so here, for example, in the Northwest, you can see there's a 10%, so it's one of the biggest representations in England. In Scotland, we can see here in West Central Scotland is 10% as well, and that persists across the different level of zoom. So for local authorities, the same. Here for Southern Lanarkshire, we have 11%, and again, at the MSOA level, we'll be able to see that too. So if I click here, you'll see 5% and 7%. So every time you click on the circle, you'll be able to compare the percentage of customers in the sample with the actual total population in the area to see how significant the representation is. So thanks whoever asked the question. Thank you, Kimberly, for leading me to this.
That should answer the question for that. So don't mean to have derailed you, but it was just a really good one to come in and answer while we had the Explorer up.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the questions here as well. So one of the questions is about the data we use. So the data we use for this dashboard specifically is only from NatWest at the moment. I think it's a really good thing to mention that part of the work that we're doing is to establish more and more partnerships with different data providers. So at this point, it's the starting point for us. It's only representative of the over 5 million current accounts from NatWest, but very much in our agenda and objectives is to add to that representation and add different banks and different product lines, product services from financial institutions. So for example, going not just looking at current accounts, but also looking at mortgage data or credit card data is very much in our plans. And another question's around, are there any tables? Oh, the question has now disappeared here. Let me see, answered.
I think Dougie's actually typed an answer to that one because it was quite a meaty question. It had quite a lot of parts to it, so we've answered a couple of them live, and I think Dougie's answered the other bits as a typed answer. Is that right? It was a meaty one. Yeah.
Is there any other questions you want to select, Kimberly, to?
No, I think we've answered everything that's been asked live. So I guess my appeal to those who have joined the webinar is there anything that you would like to see at the moment while we've got it open? Is there anything particularly that you'd like Hui to look at that we've sort of touched on that you think that would be great to have a look at? You can ask in the question and answer. If not, we can just move on.
So if no further questions, I'll stop sharing dashboards. We have just a couple more slides to go through.
Yeah, I'll take over sharing. So now you should be able to see my screen.
Yeah, if you can move on to the next slide. Um, there's we've been quite active in Scotland since we launched, and even before that, as we were preparing the dashboards and securing some of the data sharing agreements that we've secured. Some of the work that we've done with this Renfrewshire has come across Sean Sweeney's desk, and is given us this very kindly given us this quote he spoke about it publicly in a COSLA conference, COSLA being the body that actually organizes and manages the different local authorities across Scotland. In the next slide, we'll go in a bit more depth about some of the case studies for East Renfrewshire. That was our initial customer for the dashboard. We actually created the dashboard in combination with them. We took a lot of their feedback. There was a lot of back and forth. Initially, it was called the Cost of Living Dashboard, which with not great branding and a much better name now in the Economic Wellbeing Explorer. So we created that to identify some areas of poverty, especially the ones not flagged by DWP data, because DWP data, as you know, just looks very much into the income sources and take into account the expenditure. In the next slide, we'll look into some of the case studies. So I quickly mentioned the money advice and rights service. So the data highlighted some areas of even poverty and financial precarity that were not known by the council. And that's due to the discrepancies between income and expenditures, where the council was very much aware of areas with lower income. They weren't aware of areas with slightly higher income, but they have bigger bills, and thus was struggling a little bit by making ends meet. This informed some early interventions. This data was put in the hands of social workers, which then have a better knowledge of how to support their communities. Also, the way that money advice and rights services was provided has changed slightly, allowing people to call in or to book an appointment through the phone or online, which made things easier for people who were not able to just drop into the council to use this service. The other use case is that there's the Thrive Under 5 has been a fund the Scottish Government has made available for local authorities. Initially, the local authority was using, the DWP data to understand how to distribute those resources across the different neighborhoods in the local authority. But by having a look at our data, for the first time last year, they were actually able to distribute it a lot further to more and more people in need. And allow more families at risk to have some of those benefits and grants to to actually supplement some of the income, which meant that more health inequalities, wealth inequalities have been addressed. And as we know, wealth is one of the biggest contributors to health and education. So the Thrive Under 5 is aimed at those families who have children under 5 years old, and by using the data, they were able to distribute that a lot better and help a lot more people that way. The questions have been coming across, but of course, if there's more questions.
We've been quite efficient today and went through and answered the questions as we've gone along. So if there are any questions, if you want to pop them in the Q&A, if there's something that you think of later, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll provide there's a contact form on the website. You can send a contact form in, or you can email Hui directly to ask any questions. Yeah.
It'll be my contacts will be on there. So,
yeah.
So if you want to make a note of my email.
We can send this out when we send out the recording and the slides. We'll send out details of what we are asking you to complete to ask any questions. And then I suppose it's just a call to action, Dougie, is that we want you to use it. We want you to log in and have an explore and see what the potential is, because we went through it today with a demonstration, but actually it is much more engaging when you do it yourself. It's really it's very interesting to move the things around and make sure you know what you're doing. Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank you everyone for coming along today. And as Kimberly says, I'd absolutely encourage you to register and just explore. And it's that kind of practical use of it that will hopefully help generate potential use cases and applications. And if you do have any follow-up questions, then please do get in touch.
So I think for today that we will just take a little bit of time back, and I will send this out later. It'll probably be tomorrow. The webinar will go out with subtitles, and if there's any other further questions, you can get in touch. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
very much. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.